Alright, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back, or welcome to your Enhancement Talent review for SmackDown August 13th, 2019. A show that featured, in my opinion, a star-making performance for Buddy Murphy in the match against Roman Reigns. We had further enhancements or forward progression of the Roman Reigns Who Done It angle. We'll get into all of that as we get through this show. We had Shane McMahon, unfortunately, and more stuff with Kevin Owens. We're going to get into all of that, going segment by segment, starting with Kevin Owens himself coming out. He puts over the crowd and everything in his match on Sunday against Shane, but it was all for naught because Shane would end up coming out. Owens also talked about, winning the King of the Ring and how much it meant to him, which was cool. Mentioned all the greats like Owen Hart and Bret Hart, Stone Cold, and others that he wants to be in the same conversation with. Good stuff until Shane McMahon's music comes out. Shane McMahon's music hits. Shane comes out. KO drops his head, just thinking, why? Like all of us do when Shane McMahon comes out. Shane reminds us, of course, that Kevin Owens cheated. Says Owens will be in a match later tonight. And he also fines Kevin Owens $100,000 for attacking a WWE official in Elias. Owens complains about this, says, that $100 might, or not $100, $100,000 might not be a lot to Shane, but says that that's his kid's college or a down payment on a house. And after this segment, Owens goes backstage and goes into Shane's office and tries to get him to rescind it, and then just says to make it $105,000, and he chucks a stool at a TV monitor that was in Shane's office. Didn't care for this. I didn't care for seeing Shane again, and I never care for a fine angle. Like, I'm just never into that, especially when it's such a ridiculous amount, like $100,000, because that's just not realistic. And I don't think it does Kevin Owens any favors, begging to not have money taken from him. Just doesn't do him any favors, doesn't make him look good. Didn't care for this. And yeah, that we'll get to the Owens match later, but after that we got Ember Moon versus Charlotte. It was a very solid TV match. They did actually have a good amount of time, and Ember did some cool things with the dive to the outside, and yeah, they clicked pretty well together, I thought. But Charlotte ends up winning clean with a figure 4/figure 8. Ember taps out. Second, or well, not second night in a row, but second time in 48 hours now that she's been beaten clean by Bayley and Charlotte. And you go through the list of the last month for Ember. It features being laid out by Natalya, being pinned by Alexa Bliss, being pinned by Bayley, and then being submitted by Charlotte. It is clear that she is going straight back to the bottom. I have nothing more to say on that, because it'll just end up, I've said the same thing about Ember Moon for the past month. I'm not going to continue. We get it. She's a nobody. That's all that they see her as, and it's a damn shame because Ember is such a freaking great talent. And you can go back to her, Matt. You can go back to NXT, watch her matches with Asuka. Speaking of someone else who is treated like a nobody. Watch her matches with Asuka on the TakeOver shows. Phenomenal stuff. And now both of them are in obscurity. We had Roman Reigns recap video number 500. I've forgotten to mention on the last 2 reviews I did, the SummerSlam review and the Raw review, that on both of those shows, they did these recaps showing us what happened with Roman Reigns and the car crash and the scaffolding falling on him. But he was not on either show. So they just did it for no reason. And it finally built up to this. And, maybe it would have been more beneficial if that was made more clear, like when they even were doing it on SummerSlam, that, tell the viewer to stay tuned to SmackDown to get the next progression in this story. But nonetheless, after this recap, Daniel Bryan comes out. He says that Buddy Murphy is a liar, but he doesn't blame Buddy Murphy because anyone would have done the same thing if they were put under the pressure that Roman Reigns was putting Buddy under after tossing him around and pushing him against the wall, that he had no choice but to say a name, but the only problem was that he said the wrong name. Bryan claims that he will prove that they had nothing to do with this later tonight. And also keep in mind how Bryan, he blamed this on the social media era that one person says something and everyone else runs with it, and all of a sudden it becomes the truth. There's a saying for it, perception is reality. If you commit a crime and let me rephrase that. If you're accused of committing a crime, you didn't commit the crime, but everyone thinks you committed the crime, you might as well have done it, because everyone thinks you did. And so, that's the perception. Guilty until proven innocent is the society of that. But, relating to this though, just keep that in mind, that Bryan's reasoning was that Buddy Murphy was forced to say something. And so he said something. Just keep that in mind for later. Shane McMahon, back on this show, his 3rd segment of the night, has a backstage interview. He's asked who Kevin Owens' opponent will be. Samoa Joe comes in and says, he said that Kevin Owens was walking around like a Billy Badass, I think he said. And so Joe says that he will show Owens that he is the only badass around here. Yeah, so after last week seemingly building towards a Samoa Joe face turn, now we have Joe doing the bidding of Shane McMahon. Drew McIntyre has disappeared from Shane. He's just not been associated with him. So they needed to find someone new. They got Samoa Joe. How lame. I was so interested in what they were going to do with Joe and the possibility of Joe and Roman teaming together, a badass Samoa Joe babyface, and then a week later, Samoa Joe is doing the bidding for Shane McMahon. After this, we had another one of these Alistair Black, Alistair Three's Company Black. He wants someone to knock on his door. Come and knock on my door. I've been waiting for you. Black mass is for you and you and you. Yeah, there you go. That's your entertainment value for the day. But, yeah, nothing new from Alistair Black. I guess anytime a feud is over with him, he's just going to go right back to waiting for someone else to challenge him. Well, why don't you challenge someone? I mean, I don't know. I can see this ending up being, well, I guess it already is, repetitive. And it's just uninteresting to me. And, you know, I've compared it to before, and I'm not the only one that compares it to the old Bray Wyatt promos. That, you know, they're just a lot of words that seem meaningful, but really aren't. And that's what I get from the Alistair Black promos. They're just a lot of words. And then it ends with wanting someone to pick a fight with him. I love Alistair Black, but I'm uninterested in this. After this, we got the best damn thing on WWE television this week. And probably in a while. We had Roman Reigns going one-on-one with Buddy Murphy. And this was an absolutely excellent match. Murphy and Reigns, they go back and forth with great strike exchanges throughout the match. Toward the finish of this match, Roman goes for a spear, but gets a kick to the shoulder as he runs in, followed by two big knee strikes from Murphy and a brain buster for a great near fall. Murphy goes to the top rope but gets punched off and falls to the floor. Roman comes out with the Superman punch, jumping off the steps, gets him in the ring, hits spear, gets the 1-2-3, and Reigns was very giving to Murphy, and he sold his ass off for Buddy on the stuff that he did. And, you know, Buddy obviously returned the favor. He did when that spear came in, he flipped himself upside down. And, you know, like, throughout the match, Roman was just, like, stunned almost that he wasn't able to put Murphy away. And, you know, it was... And at the end of the match, Roman even just gives slight little nod of respect. And it reminded me so much of The Undertaker versus Jeff Hardy from 2002 when they did the ladder match. And, you know, I think the thing was that in the promo, Undertaker said that, you know, he'd beat Jeff so bad that he wouldn't be able to walk afterwards. And so the match comes, and Undertaker just beat the living hell out of him. And, you know, easily ends up winning. But, you know, Jeff has a brief comeback, but then Undertaker puts him back down. And then after the match, Jeff gets on the mic and, you know, he just says, "I'm still standing." And so Undertaker comes back in. You think he's going to beat him up more. But instead he shakes his hand. I think he shakes his hand, but, you know, he gives him a sign of respect. I want to say he shook his hand. Maybe he rose his hand even. But he gave him the sign of respect, like Roman did here. And that's why it's important to remember that you can get someone over in defeat just as easily as you can in a loss. And this was a situation with Buddy Murphy that I thought this match did him more favors than anything they could have done. He went toe-to-toe with the top guy of WWE for the past 5 years. He took him to his limits, and even in defeat, he earned his respect. And that's the same thing that happened with Hardy all those years ago. And that's really what, you know, started to launch Hardy into a singles star. And what really started to, make him in the mix more in that main event picture. And, it wasn't until a while later that Hardy actually ended up winning, like, the WWE title. Like, probably not until 2008, 2009-ish that he won his first world title, I think. But he ended up being in the picture around that time. And hopefully the same sort of thing can happen with Murphy. And, I'm not sure if the storyline is helping Murphy much, because we'll get to what happened with him later. He's just getting tossed around and as a pawn in this Roman Reigns saga. But once you get in the ring, Murphy showed what he's capable of. And you go back to Super Showdown, not Saudi Super Showdown, but Australia Super Showdown in 2018. I said at the time on the podcast that I thought that was a truly star-making performance for Buddy Murphy, and that was, of course, the Cruiserweight Championship match against Cedric Alexander. What I believe is, excluding the Cruiserweight Classic, the best main roster pay-per-view Cruiserweight match that they've had. I think that match at Super Showdown was with Murphy and Alexander. And it was in Buddy's, I believe his hometown, if not his home country, but I believe it was his hometown of Melbourne. And, the embrace he got from that crowd and the performance he put on in that match, I thought was, something that would be a star-making performance. But, the problem is that, you're still on 205 Live, you still have the Cruiserweight title. So when you're not in the mainstream's eye on television, it's hard, it would have been hard to really make that a star-making performance. But this, I can see, people starting to really get behind Buddy after this. And I'm a big fan of Buddy Murphy, from what I've seen. I think that he can do a lot of great things, and it's been a shame that it's taken this long since being moved to SmackDown. Like, this was his first match on television. He had the match at SummerSlam against Apollo Crews, which ended in a disqualification when Eric Rowan came in. But this was his first match on SmackDown since being drafted right after WrestleMania. Or shooken up to SmackDown. Whatever the term is that they want to use now. But, yeah. So, it took them 4 months, and then after that, it only took them a couple weeks to make Buddy Murphy look like a legitimate contender. And hopefully that isn't lost in all this. Hopefully we can keep momentum going for Murphy and keep him involved with other things on SmackDown. After this, we got the Samoa Joe versus Kevin Owens match. Elias is announced as the special guest enforcer again, as Greg Hamilton informs us. With as Shane said in his promo earlier in the night, that the 24/7 rules would be suspended for Elias tonight. I just don't get why it's called the 24/7 Championship if we're allowed to suspend the 24/7 rules. Like, I mean, call me crazy, but I always thought, 24/7 meant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. But, minor details. Who really cares? So Elias comes out in his referee garb again. Owens hits a pop-up power bomb on Samoa Joe. Elias drags the ref out and comes in to be the referee in that ref's place. Owens gets in his face, but knows he can't strike him because he doesn't want to get another $100,000 fine. So Owens gets rolled up by Joe, and Elias hits the fastest 3 count ever, and gives Joe the win. And so this begs the question, why the hell didn't they just do this at the fucking pay-per-view? What kind of idiot heels are they? If Elias could have just taken out the ref and then given that fast 3 count like he did on this show, why didn't he just do that last on the pay-per-view on Sunday? Whatever. Whatever. Brian and Rowan clear the locker room to talk to Buddy Murphy, just like Roman Reigns did the previous week. And this segment was pretty much copy and paste of what Roman did, but Rowan and Brian did it. So they sit Buddy down. Brian tells Murphy that he's a liar, and he wants to hear Murphy say that he lied. Murphy doesn't respond, so Rowan picks him up and tosses him all across the locker room. And then, just as Roman Reigns did, and I'm also forgetting that the beautiful picture in all this, and I'm sure that everyone is going to see this in all the memes and pictures on Twitter, that Brian was fantastic in his acting in this bit when he's trying to get Murphy to admit that he lied. And he's like, he has his nose right in Murphy's face, just saying, you lied. It hurt Rowan's reputation, it hurt my reputation, and you need to admit it. And yeah, after that, that's when Rowan starts tossing Murphy around. He picks him up by the throat and just chokes him against the wall. And Brian demands that Murphy admit that he lied. And Murphy obliges. He says, I lied. So, you see and this is why I continue to say that Daniel Bryan is the greatest heel in pro wrestling. He used the exact thing that he was using as the reason that Murphy was lying to get him to do what he wanted. Because he said from the beginning that, when Roman was beating up Murphy, he gave him no choice but to say a name and give him what he wanted. And so in turn, Brian did the exact same thing to get him to admit that he was lying. The great heel logic. So, after this, we get, it's supposed to be Woods and Big E versus the Revival. But Randy Orton comes out after the New Day's entrance. Randy Orton calls out, Kofi for running away from a fight in front of his wife and kids at SummerSlam, he says. And he then challenges Kofi to make this a 6-man tag match, with he and Kofi being on each respective team. So that ends up being our main event match. The Revival are going to end up getting the pinfall over Xavier Woods with the Shatter Machine. It was a fine match, a fine main event. The Revival try to beat down Woods and E after, but Kofi comes in for the save. Orton blindsides Kofi with an RKO. Woods and Big E get one as well, and Kofi is lifted up for a second one, and that will set up the eventual rematch for Randy Orton and Kofi Kingston. And then we get our closing angle of the night. Roman confronts Bryan and Rowan. Roman comes into Bryan and Rowan's dressing room. Bryan wants him to apologize. Roman instead wants to fight him, but Bryan says they conducted their own investigation, and they're going to reveal who the culprit was next week. They leave you with the cliffhanger. So I gotta give him credit, because I always like a storyline in wrestling when things progress week to week. And, like, maybe things aren't always the best managed, and it could have been better here or there. But if you give me a reason to want to see what's going to happen next week, that's how you keep people interested. And so I thought that, just like as goofy as what they did with Roman on SmackDown a couple weeks ago was, when the scaffolding fell on him and all that, it made you want to tune in next week. And, this did the same. And I'm curious if Bryan is going to point the finger at someone, or if he's going to just say, it was me. Yeah, it's me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin. I don't think it was Vince, but you never know. So, we'll see where that goes. I'm sure one way or another, it's going to end up being Bryan. But do they pay that off next week, or do they keep stringing it along further? So I'm interested to see where that goes. Overall, a solid episode of SmackDown. Just the Roman and Buddy Murphy match made this show leaps and bounds better than what it would have been without it. I think there were. I want to say there were only those 3 matches: the Ember Moon match, and the tag match, and the Roman and Buddy Murphy match. So, and all 3 of those matches were solid. I don't like what they're doing with Ember Moon, but I can't deny that they at least gave her a chance to have a good match with Charlotte. They gave the tag match a good amount of time. They gave Murphy and Reigns enough time to hit it out of the park. So, if there's going to be 3 matches, at least all 3 of them delivered in some way. And, the angles and everything they did was all very good. So I thought this was actually a really good episode of SmackDown for the most part. But, yeah, that's all we got for today. Me and Chris will be doing the podcast on Thursday, so we'll have some more stuff on the channel then. After that, we'll be back for the Raw and SmackDown reviews next week. So, until then, thank you.